So today, Mark and I are going to share three mistakes that will torpedo your relationship.
So, what are those three mistakes, Christina? Do you want to take a wild guess? Or
Not watching enough cat videos on YouTube.
that
Um,
would be a problem.
not especially like where they jump from the cucumbers. Do you know what I'm talking about? You just type in like cats versus cucumbers on YouTube, and
You're kidding.
it's such no. I don't know if they think they're snakes or something, but they literally fly into the air if they notice a cucumber's on the ground next to them.
Okay, so no, it's not cat. These are, now here's a hint. They are
Okay.
three sneaky mistakes that can torpedo your relationship, and the illusion is a submarine that's kind of underneath the surface firing torpedoes at your relationship. So
Covertly. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not the surface stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
normally we might think of these three things. The big mistakes, the things that cause problems.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody says communicate. Oh, we have a communication problem.
Okay.
Of course, infidelity and trust and incompatibility.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is those are symptoms, not causes.
Oh.
So if you have
Hmm.
communication problems, it's a symptom of something else. And I had a professor
Oh.
in grad school who said what doesn't get worked out gets acted out.
Mm.
And these are all examples of acting out behavior.
Okay.
So there's something we need to work out here.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you want to take another guess before I blow the ballast on the submarine?
Well, I mean, you just showed me the three things.
Thank
What?
you.
So what's your real question, I guess?
Uh, well, first of all, relationships cannot be fixed by treating the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question was, do you want to take another guess at one or two or three other than cat videos on YouTube?
Less important things than cat videos. I I don't have any guesses coming to my mind.
All
So
right, well,
thank you for this opportunity.
glad to help. All right.
Thank you.
So, okay, so mistake number one is not knowing you have unfinished business.
Oh.
So let's define what that is. Unfinished business are the scars and the wounds that we carry from our childhood, and what people, and this is not popular in our culture. We believe that we're going to grow out of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked a lot about the limbic system and all these patterns on this
Right.
channel. And this is one reason therapy has a tough time working, because when you treat the symptoms, the underlying unfinished business always comes back to the surface and takes control.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, if you were raised in a violent alcoholic family, it's going to interfere with your marriage eventually.
Mm-hmm.
If you were abandoned by your father when you were 5 years of age, some vestige of that is going to appear in your adult relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But since we don't know that, we just assume that we don't have unfinished business. Well, we all know we do, but we just assume that unfinished business we put it behind us
Yeah, it's
somehow.
like in a box or something.
Well, yeah, and I hear this all the time. People will say, "Well, my mother was extremely abusive, but I've dealt with that," and I believe that. They've dealt with it. Great, they've come to terms with it. Everything that
Mm-hmm.
means, except the coping skills and the behavioral and emotional patterns left over from that are still there. And they end up coming into the relationship and causing all kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, mistake number one is not knowing you have unfinished business, and childhood leaves scars, emotional learning, tendencies, behavioral patterns. In every case, unfinished business will attempt to take over the relationship. There's
Mm-hmm.
no escaping that.
Because that's so deeply ingrained in you that that's how you survive.
Right, and as we've discussed in other videos, the limbic system, the emotional brain, the 5-year-old child within believes that your partner is the parent where these patterns came from.
Right.
And we're not consciously aware of it.
Okay.
So, and we've talked about this before how the partner becomes the shadow of the parent, and we start acting as if we're living with the parent instead of our partner.
Right.
And
Right.
so, for each of these three things, I wanted to provide a resource. So, for mistake number one, your unfinished business, I have some recommendations. And these are two. And I know this is shameless self promotion, but my book, The Dance of the Lion and Unicorn, is very revealing in this. Uh, any any book that or resource that deals with the inner child is really a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1990, John Bradshaw, who became extremely famous by speaking on PBS, published this book, Homecoming. And it's all about the damaged inner child.
Mm.
And what the main thing people can do is expose themselves to these resources and or do some premarital counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Because any good premarital counseling is going to bring up this inner child stuff as it applies to relationships. And if you go in to the marriage with a clue that this stuff is present inside of you, then when it
Yeah.
starts to emerge, you have half a chance of knowing what's going on.
Right. Not blindsided by it necessarily.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
mistake number one is not knowing you have unfinished business. So
Yeah. And so then what you were saying with the three bullet points before is that
I mean these three?
like any of these can happen from not knowing you have an unfinished business, right?
Exactly.
You can have communication problems or trust issues or what was the third one?
Incompatibility,
Incompatibility.
which is
Which
basically
that
a
one,
go ahead.
go ahead. That one really surprises me, I guess, because you got in a relationship in the first place, I guess, because of things you had in common. But is it just like not everything's in common and you find the areas that just don't deal well together?
Well, the incompatibility comes from our different defensive styles and the defensive behavior we generate to solve those problems. And so we've talked about lions and unicorns a lot on this channel, and I'll link a
Yeah.
video. Um, so you may have a lot in common. You may like the same kind of music and do the same things, and you both like gin drinks or whatever it is.
Hmm.
But your way of dealing with your emotional pain may be completely incompatible with the other person.
Got it.
So, for
I see.
instance, when you think of lions and unicorns, unicorns don't like conflict.
Right.
So, if you're a lion and your way of dealing with your pain is expressing anger, then that's incompatible with the system that the unicorn uses to protect themselves.
Hmm.
Whereas
Right. Which is
conversely,
to keep things mellow.
well, that's right. That's what I was about to say. For a unicorn,
Yeah.
their way of staying safe in the relationship is often to avoid and shut down, which is incompatible with the lion's need for approval and acceptance and having that
Mm-hmm.
emotional connection.
Got it. Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can see the wheels turning. Go ahead.
Oh, just absorbing, integrating.
Okay. So, are we ready for mistake number two?
Let's hear it.
Mistake number two, not realizing that communication is driven by emotion.
Hmm.
And as a
Okay.
matter of,
Oh, I said okay.
As a matter of fact, the emotion is the communication. See the
So if nothing else, at least hear the tone they're using, like that kind of thing.
well, for instance, let's say that you're complaining that your husband doesn't um, help around the house enough. Okay, what emotion are you expressing?
Um, Dissatisfaction. Matt,
Okay, but
I'm upset.
okay, you're
I'm
upset, obviously, but what is the emotional pain?
overwhelmed.
What's the
Oh,
emotional
okay.
pain underneath it?
Um, he's he's abandoning his no, I don't know. Is that it? He's not helping
Well,
out like
what?
he should,
So
so he's
you're
not there for
upset
me.
because he's not helping
Yeah.
enough. What
Yeah.
emotion are you experiencing as a result of that? Not underneath the anger is this painful emotion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like just not
He doesn't
like if
care.
they oh, okay. He doesn't care.
So
Yeah,
what is
I mean,
that's
I the only time I would get upset, I think, is if it was like drowning me, and then I'd be like, "You're not helping. I'm drowning."
so okay, so maybe I picked a bad example, but
Oh,
if he's not helping, it's the pain of rejection that you're expressing.
okay.
So that's the emotion. The
Oh,
communication is the emotion. You know, I feel abandoned, like you just said.
uh-huh.
I'm adrift out here by myself. Nobody's helping me.
Mm-hmm.
So the communication is actually not about how to, get more help. It's about I'm feeling abandoned.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
let's say on the other hand, you're upset and you're yelling and screaming and so forth, and Brett says to you, you need to just calm down. What is the emotion that he's expressing? What
I would guess he's feeling intimidated by having to be faced with intense emotion.
right? So he's expressing some form of fear or anxiety.
Yeah.
So if you don't know that your husband is expressing fear and he doesn't know that you're expressing the pain of rejection, you're going to think that the communication is about housework or money or the kids or whatever. That's not actually what the communication is. The communication is about the emotion.
Hmm. Okay.
Now what's interesting about this is the emotion stays the same, but the circumstances change.
Okay.
So we always interpret what's happening through the same emotional lens, even though the situation changes. Pretty much.
Like it might not always be housework, but things that would make me feel rejected will
Exactly.
continue to pop up and I'll
Exactly.
be unhappy because I feel rejected.
Right.
And then he'll be unhappy because there's a fearful thing has happened. Like when I address him, I'm doing a fearful thing to him
Right.
if
So
I'm not being very calm, kind of a thing.
yes, and see if you don't know that it's scary for him, and there's lots of reasons why it's scary because of his temperament and because of the way he was raised. If you don't know any of that, you're going to think the communication is about doing the laundry or getting the groceries or whatever. But all we're doing then is we're just assigning the emotion to an external circumstance and we're having the conversation about the external circumstance without having the conversation about the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I can see that. I almost feel like I want to tease out another example just to kind of spot it with more accuracy in real life.
well, before we do that, we forgot to introduce the channel. For heaven's sakes, what is wrong with us?
Well, if you've stuck around this long, you might like to know that you're watching Mastering Thought, where we talk
Uh,
about mind, relationships, and emotions.
we're
We said
talking.
we said marriage really is what is the word, but with this video being about relationships, I thought I would just integrate the new word.
We have a lot of fun here on Mastering Thought.
Yes, and if you have a minute, please like and subscribe. We so appreciate our friends coming back week after week, and yeah.
Great. So let me give you another example. Maybe this will trigger something in your mind.
Okay.
This this was from a episode of Dr. Phil years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and the husband says, now the wife is in the bottom right, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
The husband says, "My big offender is that I don't participate when I'm out of town." Now, right away, you know whether he's a lion or a unicorn, don't you?
Yeah, he's a unicorn.
Yeah. So, and unicorns are avoidant. That's the more avoidant personality. He says that wonderful cell phone rings 2,000 times a day with who knows what on the other end. Okay, so when he says who knows what emotion is he experiencing in that moment?
Probably fear, right?
Right, right. So as soon as the cell phone rings, he knows it's her on the other end, and he immediately feels anxiety.
Yeah. Who knows what?
Who knows what? You
Yeah.
would only use that phrase if you were feeling anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So the question becomes, does he know that he's feeling anxious? What's your guess?
My guess is that he does and feels it in like the way of dread each morning when he wakes up and thinks about what he has to do.
So so but he doesn't, in this particular case, he doesn't know that he's experiencing anxiety. It's obvious that he is experiencing anxiety,
Yeah.
but he doesn't know that's anxious. Now, here's the problem. If he doesn't know he's experiencing anxiety, how is she supposed to know?
Yeah.
And
Unless she
she,
just knows about it, she wouldn't.
that's right. And so this stuff
Yeah.
never gets uncovered. And that's why we say, you know, the emotion is the communication.
Mm-hmm.
So the anxiety in this case is the communication. He's saying, I'm anxious.
Yeah.
But instead of knowing that and communicating that, he just blows her off and says, I don't participate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so here's some resources to help put your finger on this communication problems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Books, workshops, and groups that explore emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And you had recommended this book, Nonviolent Communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just finished it.
Do
I
you
think I'll read it again.
do you think that helps people understand the emotions they're experiencing?
Well, I do because I think he lays a point out that when you are unhappy, similar to you, like use that emotional response to figure out what need isn't being met of yours.
Right.
And he
Ex-
does a good job of taking the areas where we don't get along out of like a right and wrong sort of frame of reference, and more of like a, you have needs and I have needs. And if we understand what each other's needs are, it's actually quite pleasant for people who care about you to meet your needs when they feel like it's an
Right.
invitation and not forced. And so with him forcing you to identify, I'm unhappy, like what need isn't being met and what do I actually want to do about it? Like what am I asking for
Right.
or what
Right.
am I going to change for me? So anyway, little in depth in the book, but yeah, I think it was helpful. And I'm still like, oh, I'm mad. What do I actually want? like
Right.
stopping to think because I don't normally go there. I'm just like, I'm mad, and then carry on.
So the other one, anything by Gottman, John Gottman. John
Mm-hmm.
Gottman's kind of a god in marriage counseling because
Mm-hmm.
they've done the Gottman Institute has done so much good work on this. In this book, The Seven Principles for Making Marriage Work, um, just kind of gets you into this whole the emotional aspect of what's happening in the relationship. And by the way,
Mm-hmm.
that my book, The Dance, the Lion, and the Unicorn, is in Audible format as
Mm-hmm.
well. So, all right. So, mistake number one was not knowing you have unfinished business. Mistake number two was not realizing that communication is driven by emotions. And so, if I was very clever, I'd have a drum roll at this point.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Does it make my camera too shaky?
Pitter patter of little pitter pattering. All right.
Yeah.
So here's mistake number three, and this is a big one, not having perspective. Okay,
Like
so what does
not
this mean?
not putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Exactly. Not having
Mm-hmm.
perspective means you cannot see any point of view but your own. You do not understand what it's like for the other person to be with you, and you don't see the other person as different and unique with feelings of their own.
Mm-hmm.
You have this one, kind of myopic view, and it never occurs to you this other person might see the world completely differently.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that's mistake number three.
Mm-hmm.
So not having perspective, which means you can't get in the other person's shoes and see anything from their point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Well, how do we fix that?
So how we fix that, as long as we live in our heads where our perception is being hijacked by our own lack of self-awareness, we will actually never have perspective. And the thing that robs us human beings of perspective is the voice in our heads that sounds like me talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's literally being driven by the inner child. We don't need
Mm-hmm.
the inner child telling us um, what things mean. So,
We don't want 5-year-olds running important organizations.
right. So, as long as we live in our heads, where our perception is being hijacked by our own lack of self awareness, we will never have perspective. We'll never be able to
Mm-hmm.
see anything from an outside perspective. And my
Mm-hmm.
book, Mastering Thought, deals with the voice in your head. The Power
Mm-hmm.
of Now, we've talked about Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, which is a gigantic bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like this book. I recommend it. It was published. I can't remember when it was published offhand. Probably about maybe 20 years ago. But James Finley is just a wonderful therapist in Santa Monica. He's probably retired now. But this book is called The Contemplative Heart. And the
Mm-hmm.
man is a wordsmith, and you actually go through a process as you read it. And it's it's really kind of a meditative experience reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I know. I love the way you describe this book. I it will be the next book I read when I finish the one I'm on.
yeah, I guess it's still in print. It was never a gigantic bestseller. I met Finley. Finley, when he was a very young man, was a novitiate for the priesthood in the Catholic Church. And
Hmm.
he was at the Abbey of Gethsemane, and I cannot remember if that's in North or South Carolina. But his
Oh,
proctor was an extremely famous um, person, a priest by the name of Thomas Mertens. And if you were around in the 50s, you know that name. He wrote a huge bestseller called No Man is an Island, and he was
okay, yeah.
very much an awakened force in the Catholic Church. And,
Mm,
Finley had daily contact with him. And during that time,
mm,
Finley had this spiritual awakening where he felt like for several days he was breathing God. And
mm,
I spent a weekend. I went to one of his workshops, and the man was on another level.
hmm.
So anyway,
That's cool. You got to like study some of his stuff with him, and it sounds like he had his finger on something that is hard to describe, but is recognizable.
well, yeah, and you've experienced it as well. Um,
Yeah,
but he,
the awakening. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and so anyway, the book is it's worth digging up. Um, Finley at that time, this was right after 9/11. He had been traveling the country doing workshops for various Catholic dioceses, and after 9/11, he just refused to travel on an airplane anymore. So,
Mhm.
and I
Mhm.
had respect for that. I understood that.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
anyway, so if you can see the little girl inside of her and the little boy inside of him, you will feel compassion. And compassion leads to intimacy and healing.
Mm.
But if you have no perspective, you're never going to see what's inside the other person. You're only going to see what your monkey brain is telling you to see.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's the message. And those are the three mistakes, from my point of view, the sneaky mistakes that are underneath it all.
Yeah.
And
It makes sense.
you know what they say: go deep or go home, and that's
I haven't heard that, but I like it.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
where you need to go. And now there's an easy way to do that. You don't have to spend years in therapy. You just need to understand how the brain works and how this pain drives our lives and makes us, you know, I like to say that the human beings are very ignorant, stultified, mean, but we're smart. And when we see the truth, we grab a hold of it right away.
Mhm.
And so when you catch the vision of what you can do, this happens very quickly. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. I'm trying to think about like which one because I think I'll do better if I integrate one at a time. And I'd be curious for people to put down like which one, two, or three they would want to work on first. Um, but yeah, I think the learning to hear that the communication is driven by emotion like that. I feel like that is where I will benefit my marriage the most is by focusing on that, and then trying to figure out what the deep root is that I might be missing.
well, when you understand the lion unicorn model and you can really get to that emotional level, everything the other person does makes complete sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's no mystery.
for sure, for sure.
So,
Yeah. So yeah.
so we'd love to have you participate with us. put a comment down below. We've gotten, great comments. And, if you'd like to work with these models that we talk about, feel free. But please like and subscribe. It's kind of our lifeblood and why we're doing this. So, and if you want to just contact us, this might be the easiest way. Just scan this QR code, and it puts you through a little form. Don't worry about that. Just give us whatever information you would like us to have. And if you didn't get that, you can pause and back it up. And Christina and I will get an email and we'll respond to you and we'll set up whatever we need to do to help you out.
Yeah. And it's great. Great to work with people.
All right. So those are the 3 subterranean torpedoes aimed at us.
Well, yeah. Thank you for sharing your information with us, Mark.
All right, Christina, until we meet again.
All right. Sayonara.
See you, everybody. Bye bye.